Did someone say it was book haul time? Hi y'all, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sarah and I'm a Christian booktuber who loves all things bookish related, and I include spice and language ratings in all of my reviews. If you couldn't tell by the intro, I have quite the book haul that I would love to talk about. But before you go and start doing all mental math trying to calculate how much I spend and judging me, I have a disclaimer. First one is that I used birthday and Christmas money to buy a majority of these. Second of all, a lot of these I also bought secondhand. And third of all, I am very grateful to work at a bookstore where I get a generous discount that I'm very grateful for. So with that being said, I did not actually pay full price for a single one of these books. So if you're someone who can only afford to buy one new book a month, that is okay. This is also every single book that I have bought so far this year, starting all the way back from January 1st to now, which we are in March. It is a lot. I do recognize that this is a lot of books for sure. But after the month of March is over, I am planning on going on a book buying ban where I am only allowed to buy a book if it's a new anticipated release for me or the next book in a series. So this will probably be the only book haul video I do this year. Get cozy, grab a fun beverage, and let's talk about some books, shall we? My beverage of choice is, of course, always gotta get the Alani. I decided to kind of go with the purple theme today. So let's crack this bad boy open and let's talk about some books. Oh yeah, that's good. I also have my reading journal here where I keep track of every single book that I purchase in a year. So I'm going to be using this as kind of a reference as we go through these. But I'm just going to gooch these out of the way here. Okay. So starting off in January, this is the month where I bought the most amount of books because, again, I mostly used birthday and Christmas money because my birthday does fall in December. I also had some gift cards. There were some sales going on. So there's a lot from January. First one I ever bought was this special edition of People We Made on Vacation by Emily Henry. I have read all but one book by Emily Henry, and so far this is honestly my favorite one. I know a lot of people are not a huge fan of the friends to lovers trope, but honestly, I love that trope. It's probably one of my favorite in romance books. In this one, you're following Poppy and Alex, who meet in college and at first have completely different personalities. But after college, Poppy ends up getting a job as a travel blogger where she gets to travel all over the world for free, which is kind of cool. And so every summer, her and Alex have this tradition where they go on a vacation together all over the world. But then something happens where then they end up going about 2 years without talking to each other at all. And Poppy realizes that she really misses Alex and actually potentially has been in love with him this whole time. I have already read this book. I read it summer of last year in 2025 and really enjoyed it. And from what I remember, language is pretty mild. Spice is pretty mild. There is an open door scene that happens, I think, in chapter 26, I want to say, but you can very easily skip over that chapter and it would still be fade to black, kisses only type of romance. Oh, and I also gave it 5 stars. The next book that I purchased is The Dragon Wakes with Thunder. This is actually the sequel in a duology where the first book is called The Night Ends with Fire. But the sequel was actually part of Barnes & Noble's end of year, new year 50% off sale. So I actually got this nice special edition hardcover for 50% off, which I think is pretty cool. And especially since I already had the first one in hardcover, I wanted to make sure I had a little bit of a matching set. This is a Mulan-inspired adult fantasy duology where you're following Lynn, who is in a arranged marriage of sorts, but come to find out that her betrothed is not exactly the nicest man. He tends to be very violent. And so Lynn decides, in order to escape this engagement, she disguises herself as a man and ends up taking her father's place in a war that is happening right now. Last year, I read A Song to Drown Rivers, which was kind of my first Chinese Asian mythology inspired book, and I absolutely fell in love with that book. It was a 6-star read for me. And so honestly, I've kind of been interested in more Asian mythology type books. And of course, I love the Disney movie Mulan. So I have not read either one of these books, but I now have both of them. And again, it's just satisfying to have a matching set. Then another book that I also got for 50% off at Barnes & Noble is The Book of Lost Hours. This is like a literary sci-fi time travel type of book, which sounds really interesting. And in it, you have this magical library where books are actually memories of those that have passed. and the only people that can access those memories are people who have special watches, but those watches have been confiscated by the government, which then leaves our main character stuck in 1938, where she is waiting for her time-traveling father to return. And honestly, I think that is just such a cool concept. I've actually heard some really good things about this one. It also says that government agents are entering the time space to destroy books and maintain their preferred version of history. So then the main character also kind of ends up traveling through time to save and preserve these memories that are in these books. So I feel like that's a very unique, interesting concept. And one of my goals for this year is to kind of read a little bit more outside of my comfort zone, and one of those is exploring the genre of sci-fi a little bit more. Then we have a book by one of my all-time favorite authors, and that is The Lost Husband by Katherine. This was the last book that I needed in order to complete my Katherine collection. So I now have every single one of her books that she has ever written because I love her that much. And in this one, you're following Libby, who is dealing with the loss of her husband and also trying to be a single mom to, I think it's 2 young kids. But then out of the blue, she gets a letter from her aunt inviting her to go and stay with her aunt on her aunt's farm. And her aunt is kind of a quirky person to begin with. But then Libby ends up finding solitude, comfort, and peace while being on this farm, and ends up making a connection with one of the farm hands that her aunt employs. And they also turned it into a movie, which I've been getting a lot more into reading books and then watching the movie adaptations of. Also, when it comes to Katherine, spice in all of her books has been mild, with mostly kisses only, sometimes up to fade to black. And from what I remember, language tends to be a little bit mild too. At least I think in her earlier books. Some of her later books, she does include kind of some more heavy cursing, but I know I can always have a good time when it comes to Katherine. Then we have Don't Be in Love by Liana Cincotti, I think is how you say her name. And she started off as a indie author. This is one of 2 books that she's written, and then her other book, which we'll talk about here in just a sec, actually just got traditionally published. But this one, you're following 21-year-old Adelaide, who transfers to one of the most prestigious universities in the world, London's Townsend University, where she meets Dorian Blackwood, who is the youngest of a prominent British family who is very well known in the entertainment industry in England. And he also happens to be a student at the university that Adelaide has transferred to. But Dorian kind of wants to just live a normal college life, so he ends up striking a deal with Adelaide to keep his identity a little bit of a secret. Even though I have not read this one, I do know that Picking Daisies on Sunday, which is Liana Cincotti's other book, is closed door, so I would imagine that this one is also closed door too. Then we have Love at First Book by Jen McKinley. This one has actually been on my list for a while, and I finally decided to pick up a copy. This one you're following Emily, who's a librarian on Martha's Vineyard and has always dreamt of traveling the world, and so then she ends up getting an offer from one of her favorite authors to move to Dublin, and so obviously Emily jumps on that opportunity. And her favorite author happens to be in the midst of writing the final book in a series that she has absolutely loved, but her favorite author happens to also be having writer's block. But unfortunately, Emily also has to deal with her favorite author's son, who tends to be kind of a grumpy pants. Not only that, but he also manages the bookstore owned by Emily's favorite author. We got kind of a little bit of a workplace romance, what I would imagine is a grumpy sunshine. I think this is an open door romance. I'm not entirely sure because I haven't read it yet, but I'm at least going into that knowing that I might have to skip a couple scenes here and there. Then we have a book that I have actually already read this year, and that is The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. This is Holly Jackson's latest young adult mystery thriller, and I've been waiting for over a year for it to come out in paperback because I own all of her other young adult mysteries in paperback. In this one, you're following 18-year-old Belle, whose mother 16 years ago, suddenly disappeared without a single trace. And so it was just Belle and her dad for most of her life growing up. Then a film crew decides to do kind of a true crime documentary on the disappearance of Rachel Price. And in the midst of filming that documentary, Rachel Price actually reappears. So then all of a sudden, not only is Belle having to relive when her mother disappeared, she now is trying to figure out how to reconnect with her mom 16 years later. So what turned into a true crime missing persons case is now a reappearance, figuring out where has Rachel Price been all of this time. This one was not my favorite by Holly Jackson, but I did still have a really good time reading it. Language is pretty medium to high, but there is no spice in this, and I know I can just always count on Holly Jackson for a good time, especially since I tend to be a little bit pickier when it comes to mystery thrillers. I don't really want anything that leaves me feeling icky at the end of the book, but with Holly Jackson, I've never really felt that, and she's always really good about incorporating some twists at the end. Then we have a book that I started reading, I think back in February, and made it about 60% of the way through, and then decided to soft DNF it, and that is The Enchanted Greenhouse by Sarah Beth Durst. This is actually the sequel to The Spell Shop, and honestly, I really enjoyed The Spell Shop. I'm not a huge cozy fantasy reader, but I did really enjoy that one. I gave it 4 stars. There's no spice, language is mild in that one, and The Spell Shop also kind of left on a mini cliffhanger, and so I went into the sequel expecting it to pick up right where we left off, but actually in this one you're following a completely different set of characters, so I was a little disappointed by that, but I still went into it optimistic. And then I kind of got into a reading slump, and sadly just reading cozy fantasy was not helping me in that reading slump, so I decided to put it down for now. But so far there is still no spice in this and no major language either. In this one, magic has been outlawed by the Empire, and anyone who does use magic ends up getting thrown in jail or imprisoned. And so in this one you're following Terelu, who does accidentally use magic and accidentally brings a spider plant to life. So her punishment is that she is turned into a statue with no hope of being turned back into a normal person. But then suddenly she is turned back into a normal person, and she stumbles upon a magical greenhouse where plants in this greenhouse are actually dying. And so she teams up with the caretaker of the greenhouse to try and revive these plants, and in hopes of bringing magic back into this world. I would like to finish it at some point just because it is a cozy, fun time to read these, but for now I unfortunately had to soft DNF it. Then we have another sequel, and that is The First Time I Saw Him by Laura Dave. This is the sequel to The Last Thing He Told Me, which I read this one back in 2024 and honestly really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. There was no spice in it. Language was pretty mild from what I remember. And this one, while there is a mystery, I will say it is more fiction with a sprinkle of mystery. So it's not quite a thriller, but you're definitely still kind of getting a little bit of a mystery in there. And in The Last Thing He Told Me, you're following Hannah, whose husband has mysteriously all of a sudden disappeared and only leaves a note with a single line that says, "Protect her." So then Hannah, along with her stepdaughter, has to figure out what happened to her husband, where did he go? But then Hannah is also struggling to connect with her stepdaughter, and so as they're trying to find her husband, they also kind of create a little bit of a bond too. So then in The First Time I Saw Him, this one takes place 5 years after The Last Thing He Told Me, where Hannah and her stepdaughter have settled in Southern California, but then Owen, the husband, reappears, and because of that, Hannah knows that she and her stepdaughter are in danger, so then they're all of a sudden forced to go on the run, where Hannah then has to risk everything to keep her stepdaughter safe. This is a new release that came out in January of this year, and so I'm excited to read kind of a little bit of a sequel, especially since I enjoyed the first one so much. All right, a little bit of a drink break. Next, we have a book that was a little bit of an unexpected purchase for me, but honestly, I could not pass it up. And hold on, it's covered in plastic. Let me take that off. And that is The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson? I think. And really the main reason why I picked this one up is because it is a Illumicrate exclusive edition, which honestly, I love this edition so much. It is so pretty. We have some gorgeous artwork on the inside, and then this is what the main hardcover looks like underneath, which I think is so cool. I had seen The Raven Scholar a little bit, didn't really interest me much, but then again, when I saw this special edition, I was like, ooh, that's really pretty. Not only that, but I also had some credit at Half Price Books, and so I only got this special edition for like $20, which is insane. It is a very lengthy book, which does kind of intimidate me a little bit, but honestly, it sounds like a very interesting premise, because it says, after 24 years on the throne, it is time for Bershan Brusque, I don't know how to say that, who's the emperor, to bring his reign to an end. In the dizzying heat of midsummer, 7 contenders will compete to replace him, trained at rival monstrosities. Each contender is inspired by a sacred animal: fox, raven, tiger, ox, bear, monkey, and hound. An 8th, the dragon proxy, will be revealed once the trials have begun. 8 exceptional warriors, thinkers, strategists, the best of the best. Then one of them is murdered. This mystery falls to the brilliant Nima to investigate, but as she hunts for a killer, darker forces are gathering. If Nima succeeds, she could win the throne, whether she wants it or not. But if she fails, she will sentence herself to death and set in motion a sequence of events that could doom the empire. So we have murder, mystery, a little bit of a competition in there. The magic system sounds really interesting for sure. I have heard that the spice is pretty low, but low spice for me is like closed door. So I'm not entirely sure if that's true or if I trust those reviews. I guess I'll just have to read it to find out for myself. Then I have another book that was also a little bit of an unexpected purchase, and that is Lovely War by Julie Berry. This one has been on my list for a couple of years now, but I had always been hesitant to pick it up because I haven't really been in the biggest historical fiction mood for a while, but then after reading Divine Rivals last year, I really wanted to pick this one up because it kind of had that similar concept where it blends historical fiction with fantasy and mythology. But in this one, it says, in the perilous days of World War I and II, the gods held the fates and the hearts of 4 mortals in their hands. So you're following 4 different characters, but instead of following from their perspectives, you're following it from the perspective of Greek gods, one of them being the goddess Aphrodite, which I think is a very interesting concept for sure. And again, because I really enjoyed Divine Rivals, I've kind of been craving something similar to it, and I've heard nothing but good things about this book. All right, then we have another new release, and that is Graceless Heart by Isabel Abanez. This is her adult debut novel. Last year, I read her Secrets of the Nile duology, and I really enjoyed that one. She also does a good job of blending historical fiction with fantasy, and so I'm excited to read this one. And this one, I believe, is like 17th, 18th century Italy, which sounds super cool. This one says, love is the most dangerous magic. As a sculptress, Ravina has always shaped beauty from stone, but she has a terrible secret. Desperate to save her brother, she enters a competition hosted by Florence's most feared immortal family, revealing a dark power in a city where magic is forbidden. Again, I've really been getting into that blending of historical fiction with fantasy, and this one sounds really interesting because I feel like it's a time period that you don't see a lot, or at least that I know of. And again, I love Isabel Abanez's writing, so I'm excited to read this one. Then we have another book that I've actually already read and is a new release, and that is My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney. I got hooked on Alice Feeney back in, I would say 2023. Her book Daisy Darker, I would say, is what really got me back into reading, and so I have been kind of working my way through her backlog. This is her new release, and I don't know why, but her past few books just haven't really hit for me as much as Daisy Darker or Rock, Paper, Scissors has. This one I still enjoyed, but it definitely dealt with some topics that left me feeling a little uncomfortable. Not to mention there was actually some open door spice in this one too, which I was not expecting. So overall, I ended up giving it a 3.5 star, but honestly, she's one of those authors that I think I will continue to read every single book that she puts out. This one, you're following Eden Fox, who is on the brink of her artist career. Her and her husband have just moved to this new cottage. So one night she ends up going out for a run, and then when she comes back, her key doesn't fit into the lock of her house, and a completely different woman ends up answering the door, claiming to be Eden Fox, even though Eden Fox is like, no, I'm Eden Fox. And then Eden's husband is also like, no, this stranger is my wife. I have no clue who you are. So then Eden all of a sudden is trying to figure out what is happening, who is this woman, and she also kind of gets kicked out of her own home. So overall, it was a very interesting concept. I think just because, like I said, there were some topics in there that left me feeling a little icky and uncomfortable. I just didn't enjoy it as much as I have enjoyed some of Alice Feeney's previous books. Then we have another new release, and that is The Elsewhere Express by Samantha Soto Yumbo. Not sure if that's how you say her name. This is the same author that wrote Watermoon, which is like a magical realism, speculative fiction, fantasy type of book, which I have not read Watermoon yet, but honestly, I could not pass up this gorgeous cover. Not to mention, there's books on the spine. Like, come on, y'all. At least I think they're books. No, they're suitcases. My bad. This one also has some pretty cool artwork on the inside. I feel like you don't see just black and white, almost like pencil drawing type of artwork anymore, which I think is super cool. And also the hardcover underneath is gorgeous. But this one says you can't buy a ticket for the Elsewhere Express. Appearing only to those whose lives are adrift, it's a magical train seeming to carry very rare and special cargo, a sense of purpose, peace, and belonging. I kind of want to get more into magical realism type of books where it is more fiction based but with some sprinkles of fantasy too, and I feel like this would just be a fun, cozy read. Then we have another book that I have soft DNF'd for now. I might just fully DNF it, we'll see. This is another book that I tried reading kind of when I was in my reading slump, and it had some pretty heavy topics that were just leaving me uncomfortable. Ran out of storage on my phone, but we're back. The Poet Empress. This one I just saw on a table at Barnes & Noble and thought it was really pretty. You probably can't tell on camera, but it actually has a little bit of a shimmer to it. And when I looked up reviews, a lot of people compared it to A Song to Drown Rivers, which was again one of my 6-star reads from last year. So of course I was like, I have to pick up this one. But then I very quickly realized that there was just some topics in this book that just made me feel uncomfortable, and I was struggling to really get invested in the characters and the storyline. In this one, you have a kingdom where magic is dying, and the only people that can still access magic are the men and the princes of the dynasty, and then they'll use their magic to write these poems that are essentially blessings upon the different villages that are in the kingdom. But then the next prince, who is supposed to take over as emperor, is now eligible to be married and ends up choosing, I think, about 5 or 6 different women to help him produce an heir in order to keep the magic alive. But instead of saying producing an heir, it's referred to as planting his seed. I kid you not. And for some reason, just that term of phrases and the repetitiveness of it was just kind of really bothering me. Our main female character comes from a very poor rice farming family, and she is literally struggling to keep her younger siblings alive because they are dying from starvation. So she ends up basically sacrificing herself to go live with the prince and essentially compete with these other women to then become the next empress. However, the prince, instead of showing love, ends up going the opposite direction, if you know what I mean. And so there's a very heavy theme of torture and violence, and just the way he treats her, it's very hard to read about, not gonna lie. So honestly, because this book was kind of making me feel just a little icky, I decided to soft DNF it for now. I may go back to it eventually just because I am curious to see how it ends. But honestly, just the way women are treated in this book, I don't really like. Not only that, but there's like no trigger warning whatsoever for the physical violence that takes place in this book. So it was a little jarring for sure, and definitely I would not compare it to A Song to Drown Rivers. So kind of a negative review for this one. I don't mean to be negative, but that's just honestly how I was feeling about this book. So yeah. Moving on. Another book that I've seen a lot of really good reviews about is Wild Dark Shore. This one, I kid you not, I watched, I think, 3 different YouTube videos from 3 different booktubers over the course of several days, and they all read this book in that video. So obviously I had to go pick it up to see what the big deal is about. And I kind of was, at this point, craving a little bit of like a dystopian type feel to it, which this one here, following our main character and his 3 children who are caretakers of this tiny island in Antarctica, where on this island, I think it says seeds, which I would imagine is like resources, maybe? I honestly don't know, but there's something like very special about this island. And so our main character and his 3 kids, they're caretakers of this island. And then all of a sudden a huge storm comes through and a mysterious woman's body ends up washing on the shore. So you have a little bit of a mystery, a little bit alternate reality, futuristic type of feel to it. And again, I've heard nothing but good reviews about it. So I'm curious to dive into this one. Then the last book that I bought in January, y'all, we're not even to February or March just yet, but like I said, January I bought the most books, so we're on the downhill slope from here. And that is Stolen Midnights by Katherine Quinn. I also just kind of picked this one up because of the cover, because look how pretty it is. It's so shimmery, and then we got some pretty floral edges. And this one says, in the heart of Endelia, a city teetering on the brink of chaos, the sheltered daughter of a reverend lord awaits a magical gift from the fates. All the favored receive one on their 18th birthday, but when Wren's never arrives, her life takes a dramatic turn. Unbeknownst to her, Damien, a cold and hardened thief, has been hired to steal her gift, an enchanted locket. And when he does, he is shocked to discover that it contains his photograph. This is a YA fantasy romance. I have another book by Katherine Quinn on my shelf that I've not read yet, but the premise of this one just sounded super interesting. I love just a good YA fantasy romance because this could just be me, but I find that YA fantasies tend to have more yearning than adult fantasies, and maybe that's just because I haven't been reading the right type of adult fantasies, but I love a good YA fantasy, so I picked up this one. All right, moving on to February, I picked up 2 books from Target actually because they were doing a buy one get one half off sale, I think for February for Valentine's Day. And so the 2 that I picked up is I picked up the special edition of Book Lovers by Emily Henry, and it's got such cute little heart sprayed edges on it. I really enjoyed Book Lovers. I love how the 2 main characters in this one are both publishers, so then they team up to help edit this manuscript from a new and upcoming author. Spice-wise, this one definitely is a little bit heavier on the spice with 2 very descriptive fade to black scenes and 1 very much open door type of scene. So I did have to skip over those a little bit. Language, I would say, was still medium as well, if I remember correctly. I just love Emily Henry's writing. I love the characters she writes, and I'm a sucker for a cute little special edition. So then the other book that I bought because of the buy one get one half off is a paperback version of A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber. This is the 3rd book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, and I have read through Caraval, which is kind of the series that takes place in the same world as Once Upon a Broken Heart, and I loved Caraval. However, I have only made it through the 1st book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, but because I had the other 2 in paperback already, and I know I want to read that whole series at some point, and it's Stephanie Garber. She's like another one of my favorite authors, so I know I can't go wrong with her. I decided to just go ahead and grab the paperback version. That way I have all 3 books in paperback in a matching set. If you haven't heard of this series, in the 1st book you're following Evangeline, who is struggling with a broken heart, sadly. And so in order to essentially repair her broken heart, she makes a deal with Jax, who is this cunning Prince of Hearts type of character, and she ends up getting caught in a much bigger deal than she anticipated. I love Stephanie Garber's writing just because it's super whimsical, it's very flowery, I love the characters and the depth that they have, and again, because I loved Caraval so much, I'm excited to finally dive into this trilogy, especially since there's a new novella that comes out in September that takes place after this series. So I'm kind of using that as motivation to finish this trilogy. Then we have another book that I've actually already read, but I was waiting for it to come out in paperback, and that is Finlay Donovan Digs Her Own Grave. This is the 5th book in the Finlay Donovan series, and I absolutely love this series. It's very much become a comfort read of mine. In the 1st book, you're following Finlay Donovan, who is recently divorced. She's a single mom of 2 kids, and she is a struggling author trying to publish her next book, which she tends to write kind of romance, murder, mystery type books. So while she is sitting in a Panera talking with her agent, kind of about the plot of her next book, somebody overhears him talking and thinks that Finlay is an assassin for hire. So then Finlay accidentally ends up getting caught up with the Russian mafia. She has her nanny Vero that accidentally gets pulled into all of this kind of stuff, and they have some crazy wild adventures. And book 6 also just came out, so I'm I'm excited to read that one. What I do love about this series is that spice is mild, with the most being a fade to black scene, but it's not descriptive whatsoever, and then language is pretty mild in it too. Then I have an arc that I was fortunate enough to receive, and that is The Dragon and the Sun Lotus. This is actually the sequel to The Scorpion and the Night Blossom, which I do have on my shelf, but I have not read yet. But funny enough, I actually have the fairyloot special edition of, but the series itself is about these immortality trials, which offer a second chance in a brutal world and are open to any mortal willing to risk the journey to the immortal realm. The price for completing them is eternal life. However, first they must survive. Our main female character knows the prize can heal her dying mother, and that she'll need all the help she can get if she's to complete them. But when a rival contestant, both powerful and handsome, promises protection and the chance of survival for both, she and her mother will need to find out quickly whether she can truly trust the stranger she's falling for, or if he's the most dangerous player of them all, for herself and for all of the realms. So again, even though I haven't read the first one, I was fortunate enough to receive an arc of the second one, so now all the more reason to start this series. Then another arc that I was fortunate enough to receive that I started reading, but again, when I got into a reading slump, I just kind of lost all motivation to pick up. But it is one that I would like to finish, and that is The Verdant Cage by Jess Laurie. And this one is a dystopian thriller, which, as someone who grew up reading Hunger Games, Maze Runner, absolutely had my high school dystopian era. And so I was really excited to pick up this one because it does sound very similar to the Maze Runner, which again, love that series, love those movies. And I did make it through halfway. And like I said, I would like to finish this one at some point. Oops. But this one you're following Rose, who is a apothecary slash healer, and she lives in this village where every single family has like their own assigned job, where like the whole family is in charge of doing that one job. So Rose comes from a family of apothecaries who are like the healers of this village, but then surrounding this village is a wall, and nobody really knows what's on the other side of the wall. They just know that if they break the law or step out of line, then they are sent over the wall as punishment. For the longest time, peace, unity was in this village. Nothing wrong really ever happened. But then on the morning of Rose's wedding, her mother actually ends up getting murdered. And this is the first murder that has ever happened in this village. And when the whole village sees the body, they also see that Rose's brother is standing over the body with a murder weapon in hand. So Rose's brother then wrongfully gets convicted for the murder of their mother and ends up getting banished to the other side of the wall. So then Rose starts to do her own investigating to figure out what actually happened to her mother, and is there a way to bring her brother back into the village. And the deeper she digs, the more she realizes that the wall surrounding it isn't just keeping them in, it's keeping something else out. So very interesting premise. I will say it's been a little slow up to this point. Like I said, I'm about 50% of the way through, but I would like to finish it, and I'm hoping the second half maybe picks up in pace a little bit more. Also, so far in this one, there has been no language and no spice either. Then we have Picking Daisies on Sundays by Liana Cincotti. And this is the one that I was talking about that just recently got traditionally published, so I was excited to pick it up. This one said she had always longed for love until she fell for her childhood best friend. It was the hand-trembling, heart-thumping kind of love that you weren't supposed to feel when you looked at your best friend. But it all ended when Levi didn't feel the same way, and Daniela, Daisy Marie, vowed to never see him again. 4 years later, there he is in a crowded West Village bar, just as perfect as ever. Maybe it's the lighting or the way his hair curls above his brow, but when he asks her to be his fake girlfriend for his sister's wedding, she can't bring herself to say no. So not only do we have childhood friends to lovers, but we also have kind of a second chance romance as well as fake dating. And again, I know that this one has no spice in it, and it just sounds like a super cute romance for sure. Then another book that I have also already read, but I just kind of wanted a physical copy for on my shelf, is Same Time Next Summer by Annabelle Monaghan. This was the last book that I needed by Annabelle Monaghan in order to complete my collection of her books, except for the one that's coming out in April, which I'm super excited for. But this one, you're following Sam, who is living the perfect life. She has a doctor fiance, a very successful job, and she's about to go tour a wedding venue near her family's Long Island beach house. And everything should go as planned. There should be no issues whatsoever, but when she actually arrives to her family's beach house, she crosses paths with her first love named Wyatt. And of course, she starts to feel panicked as she crosses paths again with her first love that broke her heart several years ago. But as she not only reconnects with her family, is back in her childhood home, and reconnects with Wyatt, she starts to remember who she actually was and realizes that the life she had built for herself is not ultimately the life that she wanted. This was the first book that I ever read by Annabelle Monaghan, and I gave it 4 stars. I think I remember it being fade to black. Language was pretty mild. And even though it wasn't my favorite book by Annabelle Monaghan, I still wanted a physical copy so that I could have all of her books sitting on my shelf. And who knows, maybe I'll reread it. It's been about 3 years, I think, since I've read this one. So my thoughts could potentially change on it. We'll see. Then I have one that I had kind of been eyeballing for a little bit, but was hesitant to pick up, and then it all of a sudden became the $5 cafe book at Barnes & Noble. So of course I had to get it because I can't beat a good $5 book. And that is This Will Be Fun by E.B. Asher, which I know this one gets compared a lot to The Princess Bride, which I absolutely love that movie. I have not read the book though. Maybe someday I will do that. But just humor-wise, the one-liner quips, this book gets compared to The Princess Bride quite a bit. And so this one, you're following a group of friends who were like the heroes of the world. They went on all of these adventures, and then they kind of got older, decided to essentially retire, went their separate ways, but now they are back together for a reunion. And as they're reliving the glory days, something ends up happening where they have to team up together one last time to save the world again. So it very much is a fun, silly, goofy fantasy book about friendship, as well as revisiting friendship history. Then this is another book that was not on my radar, but it was a special edition and a good deal that I could not pass up, and that is The Courting of Bristol Keats by Mary E. Pearson. I have not read a single book by Mary E. Pearson, even though I have the first book in 2 of her other series, which is The Kiss of Deception and then The Dance of Thieves duology. And I know that this is one of her adult fantasies that just came out recently. So again, even though I have not read anything by her, this is actually the fairyloot edition of this one that I actually got at a used bookstore for $28, which I feel like for a fairyloot edition, that's a heck of a steal. Not to mention, I love kind of this bluish color, and then of course the pretty sprayed edges as well. It did come with the original card that was sent with the book, and there's the gorgeous hardcover, and then of course the art on the inside. I do know that with this being an adult fantasy, I think it might have some spice in it, just based off of quick research. Obviously, I haven't read it, so I don't know for sure, but I'm a sucker for a good pretty book, especially when it's a steal on a special edition. And in this one, it says, never make a deal with the Fae. After losing both their parents, Bristol Keats and her sisters struggle to stay afloat in their small, quiet town of Bowskeep. When Bristol begins to receive letters from an aunt she's never heard of who promises to help, she discovers that everything she thought she knew about her family is a lie. Her father might even still be alive, kidnapped by terrifying creatures from another realm. Desperate to save her father, Bristol journeys to a land of gods, fae, and monsters. There, she makes a deadly bargain with the fae leader, but what she doesn't know is that he's the one who drove her parents to live a life on the run, and he is just as determined as she is to find her father, dead or alive. Back in January, I just read The Rose Bargain, which I really enjoyed, and so I've kind of been interested to read some more books that deal with crossovers between human and fae, as well as some romance. So I'm excited to dive into this series, which I think it's just a duology, which I feel like is pretty manageable. All right, then the last book that I got in February was actually from a blind date with a book that I got at the same used bookstore as I got Bristol Keats, which I filmed a little short reel about, and you can go check it out on my Instagram as well as my YouTube shorts if you would like, but it ended up being Before We Were Us by Denise Hunter, which this is a Christian fiction, so I know for a fact that there is no spice in it, no language either. And I've been curious to read Denise Hunter. I'm always super intrigued by her covers because I think they're just the cutest covers ever. So this one, main female character gets in an accident, wakes up with amnesia, has no clue what has happened the past several months. So you're following her journey as she struggles to remember, and then you're following her boyfriend, who is obviously devastated that she doesn't remember any of their time spent together. And I've been wanting to get more into Christian fiction, so I'm excited to read this one. Alrighty, now we are in March. We are almost done here. And the first book that I got in the month of March is Just Friends by pham. I actually just finished this one a couple days ago. And I know there's been a lot of negative reviews going around about this book. And personally, I did enjoy it. I had a good time while I was reading it. There were definitely some things that I annotated and underlined that I thought were some really good notes, some things that made me kind of stop and reflect on my life a little bit. Not to mention, I'm just impressed that anyone can write a book and get it published. So ultimately, I did give it 3 stars. There is no spice and no language in it either. And I just really hope that Haley continues to write because I feel like she has a lot of potential. But in this one, you're following Blair and Declan, who were high school sweethearts, when all of a sudden, their senior year, they decide to end their relationship. They go their separate ways, they go to different colleges, and then 4 years later, Blair discovers that her great aunt is dying from cancer. So Blair then goes back to her aunt's home to spend some last few minutes with her aunt, where she also ends up running into Declan, which kind of brings up some feelings from the past and kind of sparks a new romance between them. But obviously neither one of them are the same people they were 4 years ago. And so they're trying to reconnect as 2 completely different people. And so they go through some highs and lows of trying to figure out how to reconnect, while Blair is also dealing with some pretty heavy grief. This is the Target exclusive edition, so it's got some really cute sprayed edges, as well as some fun end papers on the inside. Like I said, this was definitely not my favorite romance that I read, but I'm a huge fan of Haley's YouTube channel, as I'm sure many people are. Sorry, my cat's deciding to join us. And I'm just excited to now follow along on her writing and author journey. Then I have a book that I just finished recently as well, and that is The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Rosie's gonna help us review this one. Do you want to help us review this one? Anywho, I picked up this one because I was going on a road trip, and so I needed something that was fast-paced, short chapters that I could read periodically through this really long road trip. And so I had a coworker of mine recommend this series, which I'm very grateful that I did finally read this series, because I've read the Inheritance games, at least the original trilogy, and that series was okay. It wasn't my favorite. So I was a little hesitant to dive into Jennifer Lynn Barnes again, but honestly, I enjoyed this one so much more than the Inheritance games. This one, you're following a 17-year-old Cassie who has this special ability where she can look at a person and immediately know everything about them. So she's literally a human profiler, but then she gets recruited by the FBI to not only hone her skills a little bit more, but then to help the FBI solve murder mystery cases. So Cassie, along with another group of teenagers, end up becoming known as the Naturals. I recently have kind of just been getting back into mystery thrillers, and so I'm really excited to continue this series. Oh, I should say I gave this one 4.25 stars. There is no spice and language is mild. Then I have a sequel in a trilogy where I have not read the first one, but again, I'm a sucker for a good bargain, and so I just went ahead and decided to pick up the second book, and that is Flamefall by Rosaria Munda. This is the sequel to Fireborn, which is a YA fantasy series where our 2 main characters come from completely different backgrounds, but they end up at the same academy together, where they are then competing for the top spot in the dragon riding fleet to then help fight in a war that is going on right now in this world. Like I said, I haven't read the first one yet, but I had to show you because you won't believe me. Do you see that price? You see that price? $4. $4 for this paperback. and it has some sprayed edges, and it's a series that I was already planning on reading this year, so how could I not pass up that deal? This was from a Books A Million in their bargain section, so I picked up this one. I also picked up Small Favors, also from Books A Million by Erin A. Craig. I have read 2 books by Erin A. Craig so far. One I really enjoyed, the other one not so much, but I'm intrigued enough to read some more of her backlog. And so this one says Ellery Downing is waiting for something to happen. Life in isolated Amity Falls, surrounded by an impenetrable forest, has a predictable sameness. Her days are filled with tending to her family's beehives, chasing after her sisters and dreaming of bigger things while her twin, Samuel, is free and roam as he wishes. Early settlers fought off monstrous creatures in the woods, and whispers that the creatures still exist keep the Downings and their neighbors from venturing too far. When some townsfolk go missing on a trip to fetch supplies, a heavy unease settles over the falls. Erin A. Craig is kind of known for blending fantasy with kind of some horror thriller elements, which I'm not usually one that reads a ton of horror, but I feel like her level of horror that she includes is pretty mild compared to like some other books. So far it's been pretty manageable. And the other books that I've read by her are House of Salt and Sorrow and The 13th Child, which The 13th Child I really enjoyed. That was one of my top reads from 2025. I do know The 13th Child had one kind of brief open door spice scene in it. I think it lasted like a page maximum. So I'm not sure how the rest of her books are spice-wise, but they are YA, so I do know that it tends to be more on the mild side. So at Books A Million, I picked up Flamefall for $4, Small Favors for $4, and then I also got The New Girl by Jessica Sutanto, also for $4. So 3 books for $12, like, is crazy to me. Anywho, in The New Girl, this one follows Leah, who is the new girl, surprise, out of school. But after getting over the shock that she's won a full ride to the prestigious Draycott Academy on a track scholarship, Leah is determined to make it work, even though she's never felt more out of place in a school full of students who have private planes, designer drugs, and bags that cost more than her car. But Draycott isn't as shiny and beautiful as the brochures say. There's something rotten at its core, something that is already starting to corrupt Leah. When a dead girl is discovered in the classroom of the teacher who is determined to see Leah fail, she tries to get to the bottom of what could have happened. But as Leah digs deeper into Draycott's secrets, she realizes everyone in her life and at the school has something to hide. If she doesn't learn how to beat them at their own twisted game, she'll be the next girl to wind up dead. I have read Dial A for Aunties by Jessica Sutanto, and I really enjoyed that one, and this is one of her YA mystery thrillers, so I'm curious to read more by her. But yes, if you have a Books A Million next to you, don't skimp out on the bargain section, because I got some good ones. All right, then we have another new 2026 release, and that is How to Write a Love Story by Catherine Walsh. Back in December, I read Holiday Romance and Snowed In by her and absolutely loved those. Catherine Walsh is an Irish writer, and so all of her books take place in Ireland. The audiobooks, the characters have Irish accents, and overall, I just really like how she writes romance as well as banter between the 2 main characters. I do know her books tend to be open door. At least Holiday Romance had 1 open door scene that I skipped over. Snowed In, I think, had 2 that I skipped over. So I'm already kind of anticipating a little bit of spice going into this one, but at least from the other 2 books that I've read by her, they were very easy just to kind of skip over. So I'm hopeful that this one won't be too bad. But this one follows Ciara, whose father has left her with 3 things: a sprawling and distinctly ramshackle estate on the Irish coast, the outline for the final to his best-selling epic fantasy series that he wants her to finish, and writer's block. Which then enters Sam, who's our male main character, who is a huge fan of Ciara's father's writing, and is a hotshot editor who is sent from New York City to Ireland to help Ciara finish the manuscript for this book and to eventually get it published. At first, Ciara and Sam butt heads with crackling energy, but with the deadline looming, Ciara and Sam have just a few weeks to stop bickering, write this novel, and secure her father's legacy. So we got a little bit of a workplace romance, kind of rivals to lovers, maybe a little grumpy sunshine somewhere in there. Like I said, I really enjoy Catherine Walsh's writing style, and so I'm excited to read her new release. Then I have 2 books that were not on my radar, but I saw them while shelving at work and just thought they had the cutest covers ever. So yes, I definitely bought these just based off of the cover, but then I got home and read the premise and was even more excited to read them. And the first one is All Booked Up by Melody Carlson. This is a Christian fiction. So again, I know there's no spice, no language in it. And this one says, when preserving precious memories means welcoming unexpected changes, Riva finds that her heart has room for so much more than she imagined. Widowed, empty nester, Riva Owen lives in the Victorian house that's been in her family for 3 generations. But finances have become a challenge she can no longer ignore. Her daughter is pushing her to move, and after considering all of her options, Riva knows selling would be the smartest course, but she just can't bring herself to leave decades of memories in her cherished library filled with hundreds of books. When she pursues an alternative, opening her home to women like her who need a room to rent, Riva is unprepared for the mix of personalities of her new housemates. She's even more unprepared for Marcus, the handsome and handy older brother of one of her new tenants. So there is a little bit of a romance in there as well, and again, this cover is so cute, y'all. Like I said earlier, I've been wanting to get more into Christian fiction, so I'm excited to pick up this one. And then the other one that I got is also a Christian fiction, and that is Hearts on the Fly by Tony Shiloh, which again, this one just has such a cute cover, and it's a no spice hockey romance. Like, sign me up, because I want to get more into hockey romances, but I know a lot of the popular ones are very heavy spice-wise, and so anytime I find little gems like this that I know don't have spice, but I could still potentially get the same effect of a hockey romance, you're darn tootin', I'm gonna pick it up. This one says, Jabari Hall has spent his entire life chasing victory on the ice, but one devastating hit leaves him benched, not just from hockey, but from the future he thought he had. Now, as he struggles with deteriorating eyesight, his well-meaning teammates set him up on a date, hoping it will cheer him up. Only the date they choose is none other than Val Elliott, his ex's sister. Val never expected to be sitting across from Jabari, especially after the way he broke her sister's heart. But when Jabari opens up about his diagnosis, Val's guarded heart softens and she offers him a listening ear. What begins as a simple friendship quickly turns into something more. So we have ex's sister, friends to lovers, hockey romance, which just sounds super cute for sure. Then I have another sequel to a series I have not started yet, but I'm very interested in. But I also found this one at Half Price Books, so again, it was a little bit of a bargain, which I can't pass up. And that is The Blonde Who Came In From the Cold, which is the sequel to The Blonde Identity, both by Ali Carter. And in The Blonde Identity, you're following Paris, who wakes up with no memory, and she only knows 3 things for certain. She has a splitting headache, the hottest guy she has probably ever seen is standing over her, telling her to run, and oh yeah, people keep trying to kill her, which honestly feels like the female version of is it The Bourne Legacy? The Jason Bourne series, that's what I'm thinking of. So she doesn't know who or why, but when she sees footage of herself fighting off a dozen men, there's only one explanation. Obviously, she's a spy. So I do know that this is kind of a mystery spy novel with sprinkles of romance and possibly some humor in there too. So then in The Blonde Who Came In From the Cold, this book takes place 10 years later after The Blonde Identity. And in this one it says 10 years ago they joined the CIA, 6 years ago he left the game, 5 years ago they fell in love, and 1 year ago she ran out into the cold with absolutely no intention of ever coming back. And 2 minutes ago, they woke up bloody and bruised and handcuffed together in the dark. They don't know where they are, they don't know how they got there, and they have absolutely no idea who is after them or what this nameless, faceless villain wants. And I wasn't planning on picking up the sequel until I read the first one, but again, when I saw this one at Half Price Books, couldn't pass up a deal. Not to mention that it also came with a sticker and then this little note card that also has a comic strip on the back. So I just thought that was super cool that this book came with some extra goodies. So I picked up that one, and then I also picked up at Half Price Books First Light Wins by Ashley Elston. This is a book that I have been wanting to read for a while, but again have kind of been hesitant to pick it up. And then I actually found this in the Half Price clearance section, so I only got this hardcover for $5, which is a steal for sure. And this one, I think if I remember, it's also kind of a spy mystery thriller, and it says Evie Porter has everything a nice southern girl could want: a doting boyfriend, a house with a white picket fence, a tight group of friends. The only catch: Evie Porter doesn't exist. The identity comes first: Evie Porter. Once she's given a name and location by her mysterious boss, Mr. Smith, she learns everything there is to know about the town and the people in it. Then the mark, Ryan Sumner. The last piece of the puzzle is the job. Evie isn't privy to Mr. Smith's real identity, but she knows this job isn't like the others. Ryan has gotten under her skin, and she's starting to envision a different sort of life for herself. But Evie can't make any mistakes, especially after what happened last time. So I think our main character is a bit of an assassin, where her boss, she has no clue what his identity is, who keeps hiring her to do these jobs, and then I would imagine she ends up sparking a little bit of a romance with one of her marks. Like I said, I've been wanting to read this one for a while, and I've actually heard some really good reviews about it. And for $5, what could go wrong? And then the last few books that I have bought for the month of March is Killer Instinct, which is the sequel to The Naturals, because again, I really wanted to continue this series. In this one, you continue to follow Cassie as well as the rest of the Naturals as they continue to help solve murder mysteries with the FBI. But then there's also a little bit of a love triangle that's going on right now. And because I really enjoyed the first one, I'm excited to read the sequel for it. Then another new release that I picked up is No Matter What by Cara Stone. In this one, you're following Roz and Vin, who are actually already married, but then a traumatic accident ends up happening, and after that, their marriage hasn't really been the same. And Roz is convinced that they can work through it, they can work past it, but then she finds out that Vin has actually signed a new lease on a new apartment. So she does everything she can to try and salvage her marriage and ends up signing up for a figure drawing class. And then as she's trying to hone in her artistic abilities, she ends up reconnecting with Vin. And so then Vin actually offers for Roz to draw him versus trying to find a complete stranger online. And it is through this art class that Roz and Vin are actually able to reconnect and possibly salvage their broken marriage as well. I do have Promise Me Sunshine sitting on my shelf. I have not read this one yet, but I have read Ready or Not, and it was okay. I do know that Ready or Not had, I think, one open door scene in it, so I'm kind of already expecting that going into this one. I think the storyline and the premise I didn't really connect with, but I did really enjoy her writing style, and I've heard that Promise Me Sunshine is really good, and so I decided just to go ahead and pick up her new release as well. And even though Ready or Not, again, wasn't exactly my favorite book by her, I think I ended up giving that one 3 stars, I did still really enjoy her writing style, and so I'm excited to read her new release. And then finally, the last book that I have bought is Throne of Glass. Now, I have actually already read Throne of Glass, and I already have a copy of Throne of Glass, but the copy that I have is one of the OG covers, which I know this is such a rare book, and I was fortunate enough to find it in a little free library, crazy enough. So I have read Throne of Glass, the first book, twice now, and the second time I was reading it, I really wanted to annotate and underline, but I'm hesitant to write in this copy just because it is such a rare edition, and the rest of my Throne of Glass series are in the new updated cover, so I just decided to go ahead and get the first book. That way I have a matching set, and I can mark up this book as much as I want and then still leave my rare book in good condition, which I am on Heir of Fire currently in the Throne of Glass series, and so I'm excited to dive back into that series in this coming year. And there you have it, guys. That is my book haul video, which by looking at these stacks, I really need to just hit pause on buying books and to crack down on some of these unread books that I have. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like and subscribe, as well as go check out my Instagram page for more bookish content, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!